Hello and welcome to another episode of Phrasally, Verbocious, two Geary teachers discussing the world of ELT. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Chris.
Today we are on part two of our two-part series about professionalism in the workplace, that of the employers, that of the employees, and then that of the private academies.
Yeah, first off, both of us would probably like to mention Chris and myself met as colleagues working together in Academies in what I would easily say was one of the most professional and constructive working environments. Certainly myself, and possibly Chris yourself as well, have ever worked in and experienced, which was a thoroughly great place to work, and I do miss it dearly.
Yes, indeed. It's what you said there. The both professional and constructive, I think, is what was such an attractive aspect of working there, because the focus was always on where it needed to be, and by which I mean the students and the learning, and also the development, as we were discussing last week, the development of us as teachers. The sort of administrative stuff was exactly as it should have been, which meant that it was never something of concern to us as professionals. We could just get on with our jobs, and I think it looks like one of easily the biggest problem TEFL teachers in Spain face. So we are talking about those maybe in the private academies rather than those working in other versions of ELT in Spain, and obviously things will be different around the world. But it's the way that contracts are dealt with.
Yeah, and I think one of the major things about the academy as well is when we worked together, it was a teaching school for teachers and not just students. So everybody that went through the doors after one calendar year came out a much better teacher than they went in. And I could probably say this for myself. It was one of those sort of career defining jobs where it's you either stick or twist in this industry. And it's probably the difference between why I'm doing a TESOL Masters as opposed to staying as a academy teacher in Spain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, as you say, it's the development aspect of it and the fact that it was a professional working environment.
Yeah.
And that the teaching was taken seriously. This was not an academy that was making money from people that needed to pass a B1 to pass their degree or their oposición. This was an academy that wanted to teach people English.
Yeah, and I think it cared for its teachers in the correct way as well.
Exactly, and it's the way that, and it's something that so I have two heads. I have my sort of academic year job in Spain, but in the summer I'm an academic manager at a language school in the UK. And when I greet teachers at the beginning of a course, so it's what I say, that my philosophy is if I look after my teachers, they'll look after me by looking after my students. And I don't know how far that has maybe been influenced by the experience that I've had as being looked after by a teacher. By looked after as a teacher by my employer, but when I'm looked after as a teacher, I do a better job in the classroom because you're relaxed and comfortable, and you know that the person above you has got your back.
Oh God, yeah.
Which is what professionalism is.
First point of contact today was going to be contracts. Now, both of us have experience in Spain. Contracts, we've been lucky enough to have decent ones. However, contracts in Spain can range from anything from a few weeks to a few years, although mainly they're just one school calendar year. Is that constructive in the long run for career teachers?
I think the difficulty here is your question's loaded because you said career teachers. And I think the answer is no. It's not constructive in the long term. It doesn't give teachers who want to teach as their career a secure base on which to settle down, set up.
Peace of mind is actually one of the big points as well, because if you're in the case of every April you're on the websites and you're doing interviews and you have a list of schools where you've interviewed with and you go, I don't fancy them because I don't fancy them because. And then you're starting to even gauge cities as well. But
it's also coming back to professionalism and the classroom and the students. If your head is in applications in April and May and early June, it's not going to be sorting out your students. But I think your question was loaded because your question is talking about people who are in this, and presumably our listeners who are in this for the long haul. But I think at the same time, this segment, this pod is about the employer side of things. I think we have to also acknowledge that they also have to protect themselves as employers, and that the industry, again, at least in Spain, is not necessarily dominated by career teachers. And therefore they have to be quite careful. And I think if you're employing somebody from overseas via a Skype interview, even if you've had two. So I know that contracts have built-in probationary periods, but I think even still, if you're hiring somebody at distance over Skype,
there's always a flight risk.
Well, there's a flight risk that those could disappear, exactly. But also of things that you may not find out until after the probationary period, and you might not want to offer them a permanent contracts until they've really proven themselves outside of a legal thing. So I think, whilst that might be frustrating for those of us who have no intention of being a flight risk, have no intention of doing anything wrong, actually want to stay. I don't choose a school for a year. I choose a school because that's where I want to work for a while, whatever that while looks like it might be. But specifically because I don't want to look like I've worked here, there and everywhere, like I'm always thinking about 3 to 5 years, as a minimum, really. It's frustrating from the other point of view, but I think it would be naive of us on this side of the conversation to not realise the other point of view.
I suppose the majority of teachers would not be, well, in Spain anyway, because unfortunately Spain is a holiday destination as well, so there is that just out of university type teachers as well. So it is understandable that there is, you know, the 9-month contract people, and then they will go home. But
I think you also have to remember that some of these businesses have been around for a very long time, and you know, as individuals we're the same. You know, you burn your fingers and you learn new behaviour. And I think there's a reason why these things are like they are, and it's not that schools don't offer permanent contracts. It's just that you're not likely to get one off the bat. Actually, before we discuss another point, I'm aware that we've got listeners in countries outside Spain, and I think actually it'd be really interesting to ask you to tell us your experience of what is it like applying for jobs in other countries in terms of contracts you get. So please tweet at us or email us. We'll give you the details at the end as always, so we can bring that into this conversation.
Especially outside of Europe, actually, that would be quite interesting, because basically outside the European Union would be quite an interesting take on things. Yeah, so the next point we're going to talk about was in the workplace itself. So the actual teaching, the books used, the units that you have to get through in a year, and exams. Now, together, when Chris and myself worked together, we had systems in place, so you knew exactly pacing of every book. We knew the units that needed done and the exam preparation that needed to be included on top of that. Is that, Chris, what do you think? Is that solely on the DOS of a school to get that into teachers, especially newly qualified teachers? Or how much should a teacher do by themselves?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's part of actual development as a teacher is learning how you pace through a year. But I do think that, I mean, again, I started in high school teaching in English. We didn't have things like textbooks. I'm sure we'll come onto the course books as an episode. It's a particular interest of mine. But, you know, I think given that the DOS is often also, in the smaller academies at least, the director of the business as well. Like if it's their business, again, coming back to professionalism, they're the ones who are recruiting students for our classrooms.
Possibly also teaching as well.
And possibly also teaching, exactly, in smaller places. And in bigger places, actually. They've also more than likely chosen the books. They more than likely know more about the local area and what's going on than we do. So I think it is something I would expect is some sort of scheme of work, as we call it, in sort of high school teaching, or plan of work for the year, so that you know, okay, so by Christmas I need to have gotten to a certain point. Now, whether that be a page number or a number of units, or whether that be a list of grammar points, doesn't really matter what that comes as, but I think a teacher, in order to be effective, needs to have a skeleton. Now, it might be that in year 2, year 3, year 4, if you end up staying on somewhere, you can have the conversations then with the DOS about, actually, I'd rather do it like this for a round, or can I do it this way? And that's a conversation you can have as a professional with a professional later down the line. But when you start in a school, I think you need someone to say to you, oh, by the way, we're using these books here. Have you used them before? Yes or no? Anyway, by Christmas, I want you to be here. And you go, okay, fine. And then within that, I can go, okay, I've got X number of lessons. I've just got this many pages. These pages are really important, these pages. Perhaps I would do something differently. And then you can make your plan from there.
Do you have any horror stories yourself with situations where that hasn't gone to plan?
No, I mean, not really. I think it's more that I would say that my biggest horror story is working in UK high schools where it's actually a complete skeleton and you can start. I've had both, where I've had actually too much. Here is lesson 1, here is the material, and there's almost no freedom. But I've also had, year 7 Shakespeare, week 1, Shakespeare's Life, week 2, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Okay, what am I doing with this? Where am I finding the resources? Is there a textbook? No. So yeah, but I would say with an ELT, no, I don't think I've got on it. Nothing to say.
Well, I've got the one anecdotal bit of horror story. 1 year of my teaching career, I went into an academy where we weren't given any material. The school started on the 9th of September and we didn't have any material until after Halloween. So you were designing your own stuff basically every day. Now, I had a bit of experience behind me at the time, and I had sort of access to other materials that I was able to use in class, but there was 9 native teachers started. By Halloween, only 2 of us remained, and we were the only two that finished the year. Everybody had left.
Wow.
That was a trial by fire year. That was quite interesting.
And I was going to say, and I'm not entirely sure I can condemn their behaviour as being unprofessional.
Which in turn brings us on to conduct. Now, at said same academy, where only 2 of us finished out of 9, one of the issues I had with conduct that year was, this is one of my horror stories, was I was teaching this would have been about mid-March. I was teaching a advanced class, and the lesson I was doing that night was listening preparation for the listening exam. Now, I had a new student come in that night, and I was okay. Well, I'm doing listening right now, but I will make time. I don't have a class afterwards, so I'll make time to sit down and have a conversation with you. See what you can do. Because she was given the wrong time. She was 30 minutes late or something for a 90-minute class. Within a minute, she had handed me a post-it note saying, "This class seems like too high a level." She had written it in Spanish, and she had basically said the level was too high. I was like, okay, we'll go outside and talk. We can't. Wait, what? She was deaf. So therefore, no one had informed me in the academy that I had a deaf student who was not anywhere near C1. I would have said A2 at best.
Right.
And I was forever angry at said academy for putting me in that situation for 45 minutes of my night being completely helpless. I'd never felt more helpless in my life for a student. And it's one of those. Luckily enough, in the organisation I work with in Belfast, I had some people who had worked with deaf students before, and they helped me out for the next class, and I used a lot of advice they used. But they have been put in that situation. I honestly thought was unforgivable from the academy.
It's not often that I'm rendered speechless.
What annoyed me most is they took €60 off her for the month. Now, she came in on the Tuesday. That was the first time I'd met her. And I don't know Spanish sign language. And we were communicating through Google Translate on 2 mobile phones, because my Spanish just wasn't a great level at the time. Thankfully, thanks to some of the people I had back in Belfast, they were able to send me material to help me for the next class. Which she was able to do, which she was getting, and all that kind of thing. She never came back after that, and I felt horrendous.
Well, I'm not surprised. And you
Yeah.
You were put in that situation. So was she. And unfortunately, in those situations as well, is that no matter how sympathetic the other person, you are the face of that business at that moment. I'll say it again. I'm not often left speechless. And I genuinely did not know that story before recording this podcast today, and I don't have anything to say. That is extraordinary.
So there has to be a level of, like, you wouldn't get that in any other workplace. And one of an important thing in referring to conduct is, now I don't know if this is just my sort of echo chamber from reading things online and my source material online.
Mm-hmm.
I know in New Zealand there is a teaching union being set up for ELT teachers. One has been set up in Ireland recently, ELT Advocacy Ireland, and a recent one has been set up in the UK, which has just got an endorsement from Scott Thornbury. Now, is this the tide turning on how academies conduct themselves? Is this the teachers starting to fight back?
Well, I think we have to live and we have to see it, and see what happens. Maybe, but I think, as we've already said, we've had different experiences. I'm fortunate. I feel that my ELT experiences have been, on the whole, very good and very professionally developmental. But I'm very, very aware of all of the other versions of working in ELT, both in the UK and in Spain, that that exist. And I think for everybody's point of view, apart from necessarily those dud employers, it needs to happen because it's not fair for the students and it's not fair for the teachers. You're talking, as I said earlier on, employers are hiring at a distance, but so are we when we apply for these jobs. We are applying at distance, so we are at a disadvantage. I mean, you have to always remember that I always approach an interview as I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me, and I think that's how it should be.
Yeah, I have an A4 page of, it's usually about 22 to 25 questions.
Yeah, and I think, and that is how it should be. But nonetheless, you can, like employees, candidates can pull the wool over the eyes of an employer. It can happen the other way around, and it can take a while for you to realise that that's happened as well. And that's not good for you as a professional, and it's not good for the students that you're teaching. And I think that also, kind of talking about the good of the students, kind of brings us to our fourth and final point, which is monitoring, and the extent to which the director of studies has oversight over what's happening in the school.
Again, you and me got very lucky. We're working together. Everybody knew where everybody was. And funny, because I don't have this now, and I was talking to another teacher about this the other day. Everybody hates the word meetings, but you know what? I'm actually a big supporter of them if they're done constructively. Because when we worked together, we had Monday morning meetings, 10 o'clock. If there was any extra information or anything different or new to cover, there would be a Thursday morning meeting. Now, I don't know if that's changed, but I think that makes such a big difference in knowing where everybody is with their classes and with their students and knowing what's going on under the one roof.
Mm-hmm. It gives an anchor point to the week where that everyone's going to come together and common problems can be thrashed out, and it can also be a case of you thinking that it's just you that can't get something to work, and then you realise, well, actually none of us are getting this thing from our students, or I am, but I'm doing it like this. Oh, I'll try that. It is that as well, isn't it? And that's as much as it is development as it is monitoring. But I think monitoring is more than that, no?
But I think there has to be, I don't know, maybe the word meeting just has those bad connotations, but even, I was talking to another teacher the other day, and even he was saying, I want a meeting once a week, because right now we are 5 individuals that so happen to be under the one roof for a whole year.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, isn't it? Is that a meeting for meeting's sake is not necessarily a very constructive thing, but a meeting with a purpose.
Where everybody takes part, or 90% of people take part if there's something to say or something to cover, yeah.
But taking part can be as much. I've got a big thing about participation, and participation doesn't need to look like participation. Somebody can participate in a meeting by taking away an idea and using it.
It's a bit like I explained to students, it's a bit like the speaking exams where you have to look like you're listening, nod your head, shake your head, or make notes. That's participation.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. And I think it's a bit like you can't actually see learning taking place. You can measure progress, but you can't watch learning. You can't watch participation either. Just because somebody makes 8 points in a meeting does not mean they participated more than someone who's remained silent. But I think we're drifting off. I think monitoring is also about making sure that you're covering the material, that your students are making progress, and that your employer is not simply taking €60 off them to babysit them. How should an academy monitor the teaching?
I don't think it's just a case of registers. I think this comes back into unit planning, block planning, and content control, because everybody needs to be somewhere. It can't be a complete surprise if someone's finished a book at Christmas, but someone's still in the welcome unit.
Because you need to know where everybody is, right?
Yeah, but I think it's sort of a professional development as well, because if you're not it's not a bad thing. Everybody's been in this situation. If someone has just completed a CELTA and they're in their first academy role, they need direction. They need to know where to go and how to. If you have a 12-unit book, you need to know, okay, there's 3 terms, 4 units, 4 units, and 4 units. If they're an exam class, you need to bring in extra stuff into the classroom, and you need to know the exam as well. So there's a certain skeleton, maybe not even of the months of the terms, but there needs to be a certain skeleton of the year for how you conduct yourself, because someone who's just out of a CELTA won't know this.
And that's the point, isn't it? Is you have, as the employer, you have to give direction so that somebody who doesn't have the experience can work with it anyway, and that's really important. And it's as much about monitoring to ensure that your students are making progress, but also about making sure that your teachers know where they are, and then being able to swoop in and help them if they need to.
So, second anecdote on that idea, there so happened to be, now, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, like everything is, there was myself, the DOS, 2 or 3 other teachers, having lunch in middle of May. We were having lunch, and one of the teachers had piped up that it just came into conversation about a topic that was in one of the books that I was also doing, that was in the penultimate unit of the book. Penultimate unit being unit 11 of 12, middle of May, which is exactly where you should be in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the DOS had piped up saying, well, you'll never guess what, one of the other teachers, who isn't here today. Now, I thought it was inappropriate for him to talk about other teachers, two other teachers, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Coming back to conduct, you don't discuss the professionalism of your employees with other employees.
Exactly. Now, what he said was, a student had complained about another teacher. He had a discussion with said other teacher, who, in the middle of May, was in Unit 4 of the book, of 12, which is where you should have been at Christmas. Now, that sort of got me thinking both sides of the argument. Now, yes, there is the common sense approach, and 12 units, you have a year to get it done. However, a new CELTA graduate, for example, I mean, look at how you normally use the objective books. Objective's 2-year book. Look, there's 24 units. Is there 26 in the advanced? Or is that proficiency? I can't remember. Now, fair enough. 12-unit book, that should be near finished by the end of May. And that is pretty bad in terms of professionalism. Now, the other side of that coin is, why was it the middle of May and the DOS wasn't aware that one teacher was in Unit 4?
Because the oversight was lacking.
Which I think there was still, okay, yeah, that's a pretty major fault of the teacher, even if they're a newly qualified teacher. But there's still a pretty major fault with the DOS as well. If they've gone from September to the middle of May not knowing where one of their employees are.
It's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
If you would like to get involved in our conversation, you can tweet us at
Phrasally V on Twitter.
Email us.
Phrasally@gmail.com.
And we would very much appreciate any likes or comments on your podcasting stream of choice. And as I said earlier on in the podcast, please do get in touch with us about your experiences of being employed, so we can add your comments to our podcast. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye.